Hi, this is Melissa Hardin. I am presenting the evidence of oppression since 1960. Before we get to what has happened since 1960, it's important to have a foundation of what led to the oppression that we see today. So with that, we go back to 1619 when African Americans were first brought to the U.S. for the purpose of slavery. They were not brought for the purpose of indentured servitude or with any pathway towards freedom, purely to be the labor force for the South. In 1865, with the end of Civil War, also brings the end of slavery in the South. But free slaves were not given retribution or financial help from the federal government to get on their feet. Most of them found themselves working the same jobs that they had previously been enslaved to make ends meet. From the 1880s to 1890s, we see oppression continue through Jim Crow laws, and this legalized the segregation of African Americans and whites. Specifically, there were areas where whites were served, restaurants, parks, public places that African Americans could not have the same access. In 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson upheld those Jim Crow laws, and so oppression continued through those very legalized forms of discrimination and segregation. From the 1950s, 1960s, you start to see civil rights movements, Black Power movements. African Americans begin to fight against segregation in very coordinated ways, and there are boycotts, public demonstrations, sit-ins, marches. This forced the government to react, and the way they did so is enacting equal rights legislation. In 1954, Brown versus Board of Education declared school segregation unconstitutional as well. With the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the 1965 Voting Rights Act, African Americans theoretically should have gained equality. In reality, that oppression continued to play out in the segregated South. And with that, we will pause and you'll click on the video below to learn a little bit more since 1960.